What's up everybody, and welcome to my making a logging map tutorial series. Today we're going to be looking at the software you're going to need, a blank map, and we'll go over briefly sort of some things to look at in Giants Editor, how to maneuver around some of the menus, how to move the map around itself, zoom, pan, all that sort of stuff. And then we'll look briefly also about terrain editing and foliage painting. What's that? All that kind of stuff. And then lastly, backup and saving. Well, saving and backup. But anyway, all right, let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need is Giants Editor itself. And if you don't have a Giants Developer Network login, you'll have to register with the website. It's free. Once you register, you can get in here to look at the documentation, the forum. There's video tutorials and downloads, all kind of downloads. A lot of this stuff is still from 17. You can look at the dates over here, and some of this stuff is pretty old. But the Giants editor is right there, and I see it's 64-bit. I'm not sure if they have a 32-bit version or not. That's all I see there. But anyway, I think most everybody by now has probably got 64-bit. But if you don't, I'm not sure what to do about the 32-bit. But anyway, there's 64-bit right there. You just download that and install it. The next thing you're going to need is Paint.net. Paint.net is a image processing manipulation software. This is where you'll edit the little thumbnails and the splash screen when your map first comes up while it's loading. Giants Editor uses a file format called .dds, which is, I had never really heard of it until I started messing with this Giants Editor software, but it's probably similar to a JPEG or PNG or something like that. I'm not sure why they use the .dds, which is sort of a, I don't know, I guess it may have something to do with how fast it loads. File size, I don't really know. I haven't really looked into it to see what the comparison is between the PNGs and TIFFs and JPEGs and all that stuff is. But anyway, I found that Paint.net works really well for exporting out as DDS files. There supposedly is a plugin for Photoshop if you have Photoshop, but I've never been able to make it work, so I don't know, what's up with that. But I just use Paint.net and it's free. All right, the next piece of software you're going to need is Notepad++, and you can download it here. Just click this download button. It's just Notepad --plus.org. Click the download button, install it, and then you'll see here, this is what it kind of looks like. You got lines of code and it color codes things, so it's real handy to manipulate the coding behind the map itself, which you won't have to do a whole lot, but you will have to know how to navigate in there and look at some stuff, and we'll go over that in a future video. The next piece of software you're going to need is 7-Zip, and they do have a 32-bit and a 64-bit version. You download whichever one you need, install it, and then this software here is for unzipping files that you download off the net, or zipping up your map when you get ready to deploy it or test it or whatever. Okay, and then the next thing you're going to need is the last sort of piece of the puzzle is a blank map. Now, suppose you could take a copy of the, Ravenport or Felsbrunn that came with the map and remove everything and flatten it and all that stuff and start over, but I tell you, that's a pain to do. I started off making my own blank map at first just because I wanted to keep some of the buildings and trees and stuff in there, but that's a major task. I mean, it's many hours of removing and flattening and painting and all kind of stuff, and trust me, it's just easier to start with a blank map. This is the one I like to use off of this farmingsimulator19mods.com site. There's plenty of other websites you can get them from, but this one right here by Blur Modding is the one that I use. There's a lot of textures in there, like asphalt and concrete and grass and rock and all kind of stuff, so that's why I like using these. They got tons of textures you can start with. Okay, so once you've downloaded this, click download mod in this case, and then it downloads to your computer. Go to your downloads folder and copy the zip file of this. I think it's well, let's see, I've already got it unzipped in here. I made a folder on my desktop, but this is not where I'm going to tell you to put it. Okay, so it's going to look like this. If you download the one that I just showed, blank map underscore blur modding dot zip is what it's going to look like. And so you'll want to unzip it until it looks like this, and in that case is where the 7-zip comes in handy, because there'll be an option here to unzip to this blank, this folder right here. It'll be here. Unzip to, it'll say blank map, whatever. Okay, so once you've unzipped it, it looks like this. Now, once you get it unzipped, I would just say probably just unzip it right there in your downloads folder. Copy this, okay, just right click and copy, and then you're going to go over to your Farming Simulator 2019 folder. Inside there is a mods folder. That's where I put it, and the reason I like doing that is mostly for testing, because if I were to put it, say, on my desktop or in a folder on my C drive or wherever, somewhere else, then if I wanted to test it in game, I would have to basically do what you do at the end when you get ready to make this thing, is zip it up and, well, export it and zip it up and all that stuff. And trust me, it's just far easier to put it in your mods folder. I've got a couple other things in here I'm working on, so I don't really want to show my mods folder right now, but under your Farming Simulator folder, there's a mods folder. Copy this unzipped blank map folder, copy and paste it in there. Okay, so here's where we're at. So I've already done all that. We're going to pretend this is my mods folder under the Farming Simulator 2019 folder, and here's my blank map. So let's see what's in here. We'll go through this briefly. I'm not going to go into much detail over this stuff, but there'll be several files here under just the main blank map folder. And by the way, you can rename this folder right here to whatever mod map name you're working on. If it's, I would put fs19 underscore your map name and maybe your tag or whatever. Like if you're, like in my case, it'd be NLA Gaming or whatever, but I don't usually do that, but it's probably a good idea. Okay, so under this folder is default items. Now this is where the items that are placed on the map, it tells Giants Editor, especially the trigger items like your sell points, your fuel station, things like that. It tells the map where these items are, so it can reference each one and pull them in and put them in the right place. So they'll be like, it might say the wood chip sell point is at XYZ location with XYZ rotation, and so it knows to put it right there, and that's where it's at. So when you drive in there, it'll give you the trigger to offload the wood chips. So that's sort of what that is. And then the default items, or default vehicles.xml, is if you wanted your map to start off with, say, the Ponzi Scorpion and a log truck or something, then you can add those in there, tell it again the XYZ translate, and then the XYZ rotation, and it'll put it in the map as a default item wherever you want to put it. The icon.dds, remember this is what I'm talking about, those DDS files that you edit in the paint.net. This is the little thumbnail when you're going through and selecting your mods that you want to add in to your map. Before the map loads, this is the little icon there. So you want to make a little preview icon to load in there. The map underscore preview is the splash screen that loads before the game starts up, the map starts up. And you want to make a pretty nice little image for that. The mod desk.xml, let's look at that real quick, but we're going to go over actually some details as to what that is in another video. But this basically is sort of the, there's the author. You can put your name in there, the version. So if this is the first go round in your first release of the map, then you'll probably just want to leave it as this. But let's say you come back and you put I don't know, you decide that there's not enough trees and you come back and you add a bunch of trees, then you might want to put a 1 in there so it's version 1.01 or something. Just keep, so whenever somebody downloads it, they can see that it's not the same version as the one they had before. The title, again, that's where the title of the map goes. The description, you can see there, just a brief little sentence about the map. If you want it to be multiplayer supported, you can do that. There's some stuff in here. Most of the stuff I don't really mess with too much. And this is where it's telling the game where the default vehicles XMLs is and the default items is, so you can load everything into the map. There's another title and description section, and then the icon. Again, you probably won't have to mess with this unless you change the location of these, which I'm not sure why you would even want to do that. Now, one thing I skipped over was this mod desk version right here. Now, I think whenever I downloaded this map, it came in as 40, and every time Giants releases a patch to the game, they up the desk version. So I believe we're up to 43, so that's why I put it as 43. So, but if it's an older version, I don't think it matters too much. Well, maybe it does matter a little bit with the maps, because if they add in additional features, like I know they added in the the painting on the grass or whatever it was. I think that was when they actually went up to a different desk version. But I suspect that even if you left it as 40, it would probably be okay. Just may not have some of the features that are available in some of the patches that are out. But I want to say with the I believe it's 1.4.1 patch or 1.4, I don't know, whatever the latest patch is. I think 43 is where you need to have it. So that's why I left it as that. Must have done something to it. Anyway, all right. Now, real quick, let's look in the maps folder. All right, so you got a map.de folder. Now, this file right here is the actual, this i3D file is the actual file you load into and save out of Giants Editor. This is where you actually load this file into Giants Editor, manipulate the terrain and the texture and foliage and all that stuff, add in stuff, and then when you save it, it saves it out as this i3D file. So that's what that is. Some of the stuff you don't have to worry about. I hardly ever even mess with any of this. In fact, most of that right in there I don't ever. And this map.de XML, let's look at it real quick. And again, this is just some information about the map. You probably won't have to worry too much about this, except for maybe right here, this additional file. So if you were to add in, I don't know, say some other, because you can see this stuff is, well, here's a particle material holder, cutter effects, stuff like that. So if you were to add in some custom, I don't know, custom effects or something, you probably want to, this is where, but most of the time if you do that, whoever made the mod or whatever gives you instructions on what to do, so you won't have to worry too much about, manually manipulating this. You just have to worry about if the mod itself gives you instructions. And some of this other stuff is just pointing to where things are. For example, this fill types, it's telling you that, or it's telling the game when the map loads where to look for these files. So this is the data folder, maps, fill types.xml. This is sort of like, this $ data is the install of the game. So this is Farming Simulator 19's install folder, and it's looking under the data folder. That's what that means. Right, nothing else really to look at in there. Okay, so this farmlands is a good one, and let's open it up and look at it. All right, so this is where Giants, added in with 19. They added in the buyable tracts of land, and in our case, maybe timber. We can set up tracts of timber. So by default, some of these you already own. So if you've played the game and fired up Ravenport or whatever, you know that you already own some of the land automatically, and that's where it's talking about right here. Alright, so if you notice, let's just pick one up here. This one, you got the little less than and you got the slash greater than sign. Well, what that means is anything in between those little what's called tags is, your farmland ID equals 25. So this will be field 25, plot of land 25, tract of timber 25, whatever you want to make it. You can set the price scale. So if you want to make it more expensive, you can bump it up to like say 1.5. I'm not really sure exactly what this name means. It's probably got something to do with the game files itself. But you notice that the ones that you don't own have nothing right in here. That little highlight there is just a space. So if you want to make it owned by default, you have to put this in between, in this case where it says 13 quote space and then put default farm property equals true, and then inside of this other little tag right here, that tag. So if you want the whole thing to be owned, I think there's a way to do that without even, there's a way to do that without even having to do that. But what's the fun of that? So we need to have different tracks. I guess I forgot to mention one thing. Let's see. Oh yeah. So the price per hectare. And again, we're going to go over all this a little bit later, but I just wanted to kind of do a quick little overview of what some of these files were, so you can kind of get an idea and start looking around. But this price per hectare is by default it's $60,000. So I bumped that down, I think, to like maybe 30,000, just to cut it in half, where everything's not quite so expensive. All right, transport missions. That's, I'm not really exactly sure what that is. I don't ever do those missions and stuff in the game. I just get in there and log. But this PDA map ._h.dds is your little mini map. Whenever you hit 9 on the keyboard and it pulls up, your little map. Or if you hit escape on your keyboard and it goes to that little save screen or whatever, where you can see the whole map. That's what that is. It's the PDA map. And we'll talk about that later. Okay, now you notice I skipped over a couple folders. Well, actually skipped over this one folder up here at the top, this imports. Okay, what this is, again, this is just my preference, but whenever I'm looking at other maps, like say Ravenport or Felsbrunn or whatever, some other map, and I want to grab an object out of there, say I want to get a mailbox or a fire hydrant or tree or whatever, I like to make this imports folder right here under my map folder, maps, and then right in this same level, we'll call it level, same level as your .i3d, I'll make an imports folder. And in here I've already got a couple of things. I got a fire hydrant, a maple tree, and we're going to go over importing and exporting things in a different video, but I just want to show you in case you are already familiar with that, just to get an idea of where that needs to go. And that's what I like to do. It just keeps everything in one folder, so I know if I want to go grab a tree or a building or whatever, I can just go to the imports folder and grab it and import it in. Okay, so we've got our blank map downloaded. How do we get it into the actual Giants editor itself? Alright, so I've got Giants editor open. This is just what you see when you first open it up. And so to get the map in here, the blank map, I'm going to go to File, Open. Okay, so when I click File, Open, I'm going to navigate to, in this case, Desktop and Mods, because that's where I start my Mods folder. In your case, it'd be Farming Simulator 2019 Mods folder, and then you're going to find your downloaded blank map. And again, you may want to just rename this before you even get started. But anyway, here it is. So blank map. And then I'm going to go to maps because I have to navigate to where this file right here is. It's not in here. It's under this maps folder. So I have to go to where the .i3d file is because that's what it's going to look for. See, it says i3d files. It won't even let you select anything else. So it's just i3d files. All right, and then click open. And depending on your system, it may take a bit. This is a blank map, so it should load pretty quickly, but I've got a few things running on my computer, so it may take a second. Okay. Alright, well, I was playing around a day or two ago with some trees and stuff, so just ignore that. But, so anyway, here, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to delete all this stuff because I don't need it anywhere. Don't need it anymore anyway. Okay, so here's what you get whenever you first load in the blank map. You get a camera and a sun, the terrain, which these three things here at the very top you probably won't ever have to mess with. You can adjust the sun, and we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later, but for the most part, just starting off, I wouldn't recommend messing with that too much. But then the blank map is where some other stuff are. There's actually going to be one more, what's called a transform group. This little blue, green, red thing here, that's called a transform group. And you see it popped up this little navigational thing here. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you'll actually have one more in here that's called splines, and that was whenever they made this blank map, they like I was talking about, they probably just wiped everything out and painted the textured grass, and then but they left a couple of things in here, and one of them was the splines, which is where the cars and the pedestrians travel along. You know, I don't ever put pedestrians or vehicles or stuff in my maps, so I'll just usually delete that. But this field's when you're going to want to leave in there, because if you don't, you'll get an error message or some sort of warning or something. It'll cause you some problems. So just leave that in there blank. You don't have to worry about anything else with that. The career start point, I want to say, is it in the very corner somewhere? Oh, it's right there. Okay. I may have moved that. But anyway, your career start point is whenever you first come into the game after it loads. You know, that's where your character is standing. So you can move that around. You know, here I can just drag it around wherever. I wouldn't move it up too much, but you can move it up and down. And that's what that little thing does. Alright, so I don't want to get too sidetracked here. So alright, let's look at the menus, because that'll be important. So just like your normal Windows program, you got File, Edit, View, Window, Help, you know, a few things that are pretty standard on any Windows software. But under File, of course, you got New, Open, you can reload, save it. That one's important. You can save it as, so if you want to make a copy, back it up somewhere, you can do that. Open mod, new mod from game, I would never mess with those. Those are for like converting from previous version stuff, which doesn't really work all that well. At least I haven't got it to work too well. Okay, so import is important, because that's where you'll import from that imports folder like I was talking about. If you export things out from another map or download them off the internet, and you want to grab the i3D file and import it into your map, so it's basically like you know, grabbing a file from somewhere else and sticking it in your map. That's what the import is. Export all with files, that's where at the very end of our map making process, this is what we'll do, is we'll export all with files. And then that way, anything you don't use, like say you got a bunch of stuff in your imports folder, a bunch of buildings and vehicles and all kind of stuff, and you didn't even use half of it. But when you export all with files, it only grabs anything that's in here in the map. It basically removes everything else. So it shrinks your file size down and all that. Export selection and export selection with files. We'll go over that in another video. Preferences, I really haven't even looked at this to see what's in there, but then your recent files is pretty cool, because that shows you some of the stuff, you know, you've worked on in the past, so you don't have to go back to open and browse to it. And then of course exit. Edit, you have undo, which is also Control Z, which is also this little yellow button, undo. Replace is kind of neat, because if you have, let's say you put a bunch of little small trees on your map and you decide you want to put some bigger trees in there, you can select the small tree and then select the bigger tree, and it'll replace all the small trees with the bigger tree. Then of course you got your standard cut, copy, paste, delete. This duplicate, again, we'll go over some of this in another video, but this is if you want to make a copy of whatever object, building, tree, rock, whatever, you can make copies of it. Let's see, create transform group is important. And so this is, you know, like I said, this is a transform group right here. This little blue, green, red symbol thing is a transform group. And now under that, you can have transform groups under each other. So like for instance, this blank map, You see how it has a little plus sign out here. If you click plus, and you can keep going. You can make a bunch of little things under here. So it's like it's kind of like your Windows deal here, because you have, you know, folders within folders within folders. It's just kind of the same thing. You can make transform groups under each other and group things, and comes in real handy, especially like with trees or something. Because if you didn't, you'd have this scene graph window here would be, you have to scroll for days to get to it and do anything. All right. So I think let's see, we got to keep going here. We've got view, cameras. That's really about all I use. Sometimes I do the show, because the show has where you can look at, you know, lights and audio sources and other things. I don't look at that too much. The scripts we're going to go over in a separate video. You can see here I've got a trees replicator script, spline placement, tree float fixing, stuff like that. We're going to go over some of that in a little bit later video. Now the window option here is where, you know, all these little panels over here on the left and right and the bottom, you can add or remove the windows. And help just has some stuff. I don't really even look at that. All right, now this next little section here under this main menu is of course new 3D file, open. So it's just some of the other stuff that was in these other menus. Now this open i3D and text editor. Oh, let's ask me if I want to save. Yeah, sure, whatever, we'll save. Okay, so remember we had a Notepad++ that we downloaded. That was one of the pieces of software you need to download. You can set it up to where when you click that button, it opens up Notepad++, and then it opens up this, which is the map i3D file itself, the code behind it. And we won't really spend a whole lot of time here, because you can see all the files in here. And again, it's pointing to this $ data folder, which is your install of the games. I think in 17 it could point to anywhere, but in the 19 they made it to where you can store or actually pull stuff from the game install itself, not have to rely too much on outside data. This way it cuts down the file sizes and stuff on the map. But you can see just lots of stuff. Here's the actual textures, these PNG files. Here's Cliff Rock Dark 2. So it's got the actual texture files as PNGs. And funny enough, not DDS. But anyway, so there's tons of stuff in here. And that's what I was talking about. This map here has tons of stuff, because there's grass town, gravel, plate damaged, rough dirt. Just tons of stuff in here. But yeah, most of this stuff you won't have to worry too much about. Again, like I was talking about earlier with the mod Desk, I believe it was, or the map.xml. If you download some kind of mod that has special instructions, usually they'll tell you how to install it. But anyway, this is what it looks like in Notepad++, and this is actually really short. You should see Bear Rock or something in here. It's like thousands of lines. This is a blank map, and it's got almost 500, as you can imagine. When you get it full, it'll be thousands of lines of code. Okay, let's see, we talked about the menus. All right, we got just a few more things to look at here on the menu bar. All right, this one right here is very important. Save i3D file. Anytime you do anything and you try to close this map, it's going to ask you, do you want to save, if you haven't saved already. So again, just make sure you know where that is. I think you can also hit Control S. Yeah, Control S also saves. But like I said, if you try to exit the map before you haven't saved, then it'll ask you, do you want to save it. All right, now this little menu bar here, which is I'm trying to get it to, it won't move down. Anyway, this is very important right here. These 4 buttons. So the first one is terrain sculpt mode. This button actually allows you to edit the terrain, height, and all that. All right, so let's look at that. Let me swing around this way. Okay, so now if you're wanting to manipulate the terrain on your own, manually, not using a tutorial like I did where you load in real world data for your elevations, then this is where you want to select this icon or little button here. Now, you'll have to, no matter what you do, I mean, you're going to have to know how to use this, because if you just populate it using the way I did, you still got a bunch of work to do on your terrain, but this allows you to manipulate it. Okay, so you notice whenever I clicked on it, this little deal here appeared. You've got a circle around your mouse, and coming up from the mouse vertically is a little white and red bar. Now, if you use your mouse wheel in and out, it increases or decreases the radius of this circle. And one more thing down here in this terrain editing area, you see right here where it says radius. Alright, so watch this whenever I use my mouse. See, it's getting bigger and smaller and bigger and smaller. So that's how you adjust that. Now if you want something specifically, like if you just want to put in 10, put in 10, hit enter, and then when you come back it's already at 10. The hardness, you know, the value really is the one I mess with the most. I guess the hardness is how quickly it. All right, let's put in a 0.5. It may not let us do it. I guess it will. Okay, and then the value, let's do 1, because I think by default it's 1. But you can also adjust it with this little slider over here. But I'm just going to type in a 1. And then also, you see where it says brush type is round. That's by default, I believe, is round. And then square, you can select it and see, look at square. But now the thing with square is you can't rotate it. So if you notice the terrain, see how the darker, well, you almost kind of see lines in it, or at least I can. But it's going to always, your square is always going to be oriented north, south, east, west. So if I rotate around this way, you see my square is going this way. You can see the lines and the texture is going that way too. You can't have it like at a 45. In other words, you can't rotate the box around. It stays north, south, east, west. Alright, and then one more thing before we start looking at the actual terrain editing itself is we've looked at the brushes, round or square. Now, these next 3 are left mouse button, middle mouse button, and right mouse button. What does all that do? You can set those. So by default, I believe this right here is what you'll see. Is left mouse button is going to be add, middle mouse button is smooth, right mouse button is subtract. And what that means is that when you left click, see it adds. But you notice how quickly it popped up there. Well, that's not always going to be how that works if you just click one time. See, if I click one time, it barely moves. I'm not moving my mouse, I'm just clicking. Now watch if I move my mouse. See, it goes a lot faster. Alright, so we've made a couple little mounds there, and so let's say we want to smooth them out some because they're too tall. So usually what I do is I'll expand my radius out some, and then I'll just I'm clicking down on the mouse wheel, and I'm moving my mouse a little bit to smooth that back out, and you see how nicely that got smooth. You can actually smooth it all the way, just about all the way out to back to where it was. Just move it around and wiggle your mouse around a little bit while you're holding that mouse button or that middle mouse button down. You can see if we zoom in, there may be just a little bit of a, oh, it got pretty smooth. Okay. Alright, so that's how you do that. So left mouse button makes the terrain go up. Middle mouse button smooths it out. Now your right mouse button makes it go down. Alright, so we can make a hole in the ground. Now, just a quick little thing here about Giant's editor. You can only go from 0 to 255. Okay, so what I mean by that is if we were to hold down our right mouse button to subtract, and we're going down and down and down and down, we can only go to 0. We can't go to a negative number or anything. In fact, we're not even going to be able to see that down there. But just know that 0 is the absolute bottom you can go. so you can just make a big old hole down there. In fact, there's the ground right there. Okay, I can see it now. See how it's kind of getting all flattened down and it won't go any more than that? That's 0 right there. Alright, now let's look at as high as we can go. And I'm going to actually cheat just a little bit. I'm going to put in 255 right there. And I'm going to change my right mouse button to replace. I'm zooming out because I know it's going to go really high. Whoa. Yep, see? So you have to kind of get zoomed out a good bit because it will. Alright, there's the top right there. Okay. So you can see, alright, so that's the difference. Alright, so here on top here is the very top as high as you can go. Right down there is as low as you can go. And all I did there, if you're curious, is I just changed my right mouse button to replace, and I set 255 as, you know, my replace to. And it replaces the train to that height. And you can kind of get an idea of exactly how high that is, because there's the bottom, there's the top. Okay, now let's move on to texture painting. And in this case, we're going to select this second little button up here, Terrain Detail Texture Paint Mode. And when you click that, you're in the paint mode. Now, by default, down here, under where all this stuff was we just looked at for the terrain editing, here is the texture layer painting. And right now, by default, it's rough dirt. So if we were to left click, we can paint on some rough dirt. Now the thing that's a little different about the texture painting is you can't, well, you could do the undo button up here, but you can't, like, a little bit later we're going to look at the foliage layer painting, and you can right click and remove it or whatever. With this you can't. If I right click, see, I'm still adding. But let's see. Oh, well, I guess what I meant to say was back up here where we changed the right mouse button to replace. If you select subtract, see, I'm right clicking and nothing's happening. Let me try remove. Yeah, see, remove doesn't do anything either. So there's nothing really you can do about the texture painting, except for go back up here to where the grass is and paint the grass back on it. See, then we're kind of in a way removing it, but we're really just replacing it with the texture that was there. But anyway, like I was talking about originally when I was talking about the blank map, I like to use it because there's tons of stuff in here. If you look here, all these ones that are in uppercase, I believe are the default Giants map textures or whatever. And all these that are in the lowercase, I believe, are extra stuff. So we got rough dirt, grass, different grasses, mountain rock, beach sand. I mean, tons of stuff in here. Forest needles, just lots of stuff. In fact, the 4X map that I'm working on for Ransom Ridge actually has even more than this, because there's like vehicle tracks and all kinds of cool stuff in there. So I really like that one, but I guess you could add them in there. You have to find a tutorial. But anyway, there's lots of stuff. So you just pick one and, you know, paint it on there, and you can zoom in and take a look and see if you like it, and if not, you can paint it over with something else. That's basically how you do the detail texture paint, or the texture painting. Now this info layer, we're going to skip over for now. I'm going to come back and do that in a separate video. That's where you paint on the tip collisions, the farmlands, and if you want to do seasons, and you can paint on the seasons mask with that. But I'm going to skip over that for now. Let's go to the foliage layer just real quickly. I'm just kind of showing you a few things you can kind of get in here and play around. But the foliage layer painting is basically the same as, you know, the painting on the textures, but you just come down here again below that one, and here's the foliage layer painting. You can change it to grass, and then after you pick grass, you can click this little layer state drop down and get a few things. You can paint on some small grass, and then you can come back and paint in some big grass, and you can see the difference just in the size there. But anyway, just get in there and play around. And if you want to remove the grass, I'll show you how to do that real quick. All I do usually is just come up here and select this empty thing, then just left click, and see, you can remove it, do whatever. And then you got different types. You can play with all this stuff, but there's bush 01, you know, let's paint the bushes. There's state 1, Then there's state 2, a little bit bigger, and then a little bit bigger. You know, so anyway, you can get the idea of that. Okay, so this is the basics of Giants Editor. We looked at all the menus, and we looked at these different textures and details and all this stuff, paint modes and whatever. So I would say just get in here and start playing around and see how you want to, you know, manipulate the terrain and paint stuff on there. I mean, we can. It's not gonna hurt anything to get in there and play around, as long as you, if you mess up, just either hit the undo button or don't save it, you know. But okay, so let's say we're ready to save our map, and we're gonna come back later and do some work on it. So we'll make sure we save it. So what I do usually just hit this little save button right here, and it'll say down here at the very bottom left, exporting. And once it finishes, it'll pop up something right here in this console, which I would recommend having this console up at all times, just to see when you load things in. Sometimes it might say, give you a little warning or an error or something couldn't load it or whatever. It'll tell you why. It also tells you when it saves, but I mean, you can see down here it says ready now, so it's ready to go. But saving's very important. Now the last thing I want to talk about is backup, and that's also very important. I have a program on my computer that automatically, I believe it's every morning at 2 a.m. I just leave my computer on. But if you don't, you'll want to save it somewhere else besides your C drive or D drive or whatever's on the computer. I would recommend maybe getting an external hard drive. You can get a little flash drive, pretty cheap, or a little hard drive, the actual big hard drive in a little external case. And also another good idea is to maybe back it up online somewhere, to maybe something like Google Drive or Dropbox or something, just somewhere online where you can save it, because you never know when a hard drive is going to go out. I've actually had that happen not too long ago, and luckily I had backups of everything. But it's a good idea to get in that mindset of and routine of doing that, because if you've spent hundreds of hours building a map from a blank map like this, and your hard drive crashes and you didn't have a backup, then you're just out of luck. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial video. We'll come back next time with a different topic and move on to other things with the map, importing things from other maps, and we'll look at just lots of other things. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take one section of this blank map and actually build a logging map. It'll be super tiny, just like 1/16 of the map or something really tiny. But we'll actually make a working little map here, and that'll be in some future videos, so stay tuned for that. But anyway, hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.